In theaters now is the latest Marvel movie extravaganza, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This is the third film in the Ant-Man series, starring Paul Rudd as Ant-Man and Evangeline Lilly as the Wasp, and Michael Douglas as Henry Pym, the original Ant-Man, essentially, and Michelle Pfeiffer as the wife of the mother of Evangeline Lilly, and I believe the wife of Michael Douglas. So, third time around here. We continuing story. You know, all these Marvel movies, they all interconnect. They each have their own timeline in the series of films about a certain character, but then they all tie into each other. I learned after I saw this movie in the theater that this film ties in to the Loki TV series. If you have Disney Plus or are aware of Disney Plus, they're producing some pretty high quality, I would argue oftentimes inconsequential, but very high quality spin-off TV series involving the Marvel characters. You've got WandaVision, you've got Hawkeye, which for me was maybe one of the better ones, maybe the best one, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki, and probably Ms. Marvel, probably more than I'm forgetting. It started off with shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter on ABC, but eventually they all kind of moved on to Netflix and Disney Plus. Anyway, the first season, at least, of Loki. I don't know if there's a second season yet. I haven't gotten that far. I just finished the first season last night. It really does set up what happens in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Now, it doesn't matter if you haven't seen that, because honestly, I hadn't seen that part of the series before I watched this new movie. But if you did watch Loki, then this movie is sort of like furthering that storyline. Basically, the deal here is it's several years after all the big events of Infinity War and Endgame and all the big Avengers movies, and our hero, what's his name, Scott Lang, Paul Rudd, likable former thief who's now Ant-Man, is getting used to life again, getting used to his acting out late teenage daughter, portrayed by Kathryn Newton, his daughter Cassie, who is, she's an activist, and she's doing this and she's doing that, and she might have a trick or two up her sleeve that her old man doesn't know about, and just enjoying having the family all together. Because as you may or may not be aware, see, here's the thing. With the Marvel movies, it is a little like doing homework. I don't know how easy it is at this point for somebody who knows nothing about these to just jump in and watch a Marvel movie. They're still dazzling and entertaining, but so much is based upon what happened in the movie in this series, and that movie 10 years ago, and that movie 6 years ago, and all that stuff. This world of Ant-Man, everybody loves Ant-Man. He's a popular guy. He hasn't had a lot to do lately. And his daughter does something that basically sucks the family into the quantum zone. Now, what the hell's the quantum zone, you may ask, if you haven't watched the other Ant-Man films. The quantum zone is this other dimension where the Michelle Pfeiffer character had been sucked decades earlier and spent, I guess she says 30 years or something there. And eventually, in a preview, not to ruin anything, in a previous Ant-Man movie, they were able to rescue her from that zone. Well, wouldn't you know it, something happens and they all wind up back in the quantum zone, and there's a bad guy in the quantum zone who's looking to extend his badness throughout the universe, throughout the dimensions, throughout the multiverse. That's the magic M word in Marvel of late, is multiverse. And Ant-Man and the Wasp and Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyke and Cassie and all these other people have to fight to vanquish the bad guy, who, as I mentioned, is a character that was previously seen on the Loki TV show. So I'm not an anti-Marvel movie guy by any means. I enjoy these. I go see all of them. Some I like more than others. I don't know that there have been many that I flat out did not like. I'm not anti-Marvel. I'm not like super into these either. Like, I go and I see them in the theater and they're a fun spectacle, and then I don't ever watch them again. So if a film starts referring to something or a character or a specific plot point of a movie that came out 8 movies or 7 years ago, I'm kind of taking the movie's word for it and hoping that it'll all make sense. And in all honesty, it's a Hollywood movie. They're not going to exclude anybody. They're going to make sure you understand what's going on. Even if you don't get all the references, you can follow the story. So I went to see this in IMAX 3D. As I say, I have A-List, the AMC subscription plan, and I always figure, if it's not costing me anything out of pocket, I'm going to see this the most expensive way possible. If the seat shakes, if it's 3D, if it's 4D, if it's feel around, if it's rumble ramba, give me all of that, because honestly, it can only help some movies. So I went to see this in the big best way I could. Saw it opening day, first show, and I thought it was kind of dull for me. Now, this is for me. I'm personally getting a little worn out on this whole multiverse thing. It's getting used a lot, not just in Marvel movies. Everything Everywhere All at Once did it. I see some other thing advertised as some multiverse thing, and it's just okay. I'm getting a little tired of the cosmic Marvel mindbender movies because it feels like the last several, I could be wrong, but the last several I can think of, Spider-Man No Way Home, the Doctor Strange movies traffic in that anyway. It just feels like the last several I've seen are all about multiverses and multiversions of people, and the multiple universes are in danger and all kinds of weird bizarro stuff. And that's cool, but after you've seen it 3 or 4 times in a row for 2 hours plus in a stretch, I'm just like, I really liked the first 2 Ant-Man movies because they were low stakes, they were simple, they were not over long, and they were fun like caper movies, so to speak. And now this movie is heavy. And Ant-Man feels like a guest star in his own movie because you're devoting time to Ant-Man's daughter. Ant-Man and the Wasp, that came in with the second film, and the Wasp is cool. Evangeline Lilly as the Wasp is really cool. I wish there was more of her in it. I just feel like this is the problem that like all superhero movies eventually have, is that they try to cram too many characters in, A, B, C, D, E, F, G plot lines going on, too many villains. This didn't suffer from too many villains. I will say that. It was one guy, and that was really nice to have. Just one's enough. Don't get too excited and try to cram 8 villains in a movie. But there's so much going on. There's so many characters. There's all these battle scenes. Maybe it's Marvel fatigue, as they call it, but I was just kind of bored. I thought the film was very heavy. It didn't have the fun that the other Ant-Man movies had. When it was trying to be funny, I never found it funny. And I like Paul Rudd a lot. Like, Paul Rudd doesn't have to work too hard to get me to like him and laugh. And in this movie, the material just was very weak to me. Now, the visuals were great. And in 3D, it was cool. As always, if you see a 3D movie in the theater, the trailers for the 3D movies, they really, really crank the Z-axis. The Z-axis is depth. So they really turn that up for the trailers. So when you watch them, you're like, wow, man, that's 3D. And then 90% of the time, 98% of the time, when I watch a 3D movie in the theater, I don't know if it's my brain just flattening the image out. I don't know if it's my eyes. And I don't know if the movies just don't use the 3D very much. But it's sort of there, but I never really... It doesn't do a lot. Like seeing it in IMAX, if you see anything in IMAX 3D, there's this countdown that starts up and it's like 8, 10, 9, 8, whatever. Whatever order numbers go in. And it's like really 3D and you're like, man, this feels like really cool. And then you get into the movie, and other than the titles, you don't really get a lot of 3D. So I wouldn't really advocate seeing this. I'd advocate seeing this in IMAX because the visuals are very impressive. I really wouldn't advocate paying extra if you don't have a subscription plan for the 3D because it really didn't feel like to me that it added that much. Storyline is easy to follow. It's fairly simple, as I said. It is setting up the next, as they call it, phase or wave of Marvel things. This is going to be the bad guy that shows up in another Marvel movie or two. This, for all I know, I don't read ahead on any of this stuff. I try to go in as blind as possible into every film, especially the ones that are the big tentpole things. For all I know, this is the bad guy that's going to culminate in the Avengers needing to take him out in the next film. There is a mid-credits extra sequence, and there is an after-the-credits sequence. You stay to the end of these movies just so that I can tell you. I feel like part of what I do here is like a consumer advocate. I'm going to tell you what my opinion is, but if you want to see the movie, go see the movie. Don't let me sway you to not see something, but I also kind of let you know what you're going to get. So tons of special effects, more profanity than I expected. I'm no prude. I don't really care, but it seemed weird to me. Soft profanity, shall we say. But it seemed a little out of place at times. And then you get those 2 sequences. So yes, stay to the very end. I always feel bad for the people who work at the theaters who have to clean the theaters because they're standing there with their broom and their bucket and they're waiting for everybody for for this interminable 10-minute end credit sequence to finally leave. Good things about this film for me, Paul Rudd's always great. The cast is great throughout. I didn't love Jonathan Majors as the bad guy. He's going to be the bad guy or the foe in the new Creed film coming out soon. And he had appeared on the Loki show, as I said. And I think I liked him a little bit better in the Loki appearance than I did in this movie. It didn't feel, I don't know, he didn't feel that dynamic to me. That's just me. But maybe he'll grow into the character as he's got undoubtedly more appearances coming up. Cool to see Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas being given a lot of screen time in a movie that's more or less aimed at the youth. It was really nice to see two, it seems weird to say this about Michelle Pfeiffer, but two older actors really up front. Like, they had a lot of screen time. They had a lot of weight and gravitas in the story. A lot of this is about the Michelle Pfeiffer character and her past in the quantum zone and her fighting for her family and all that. It's just cool to see actors that are a bit older who normally would be sidelined, as they're really up front. Which brings me to sort of a beef I had with this movie. It's an Ant-Man and the Wasp movie. It's Ant-Man and the Wasp, and the Wasp's father, and the Wasp's mother, and Ant-Man's daughter, and on and on and on. And I'm like, hey, y'all, where's Ant-Man at? I felt like he was a guest star in his own movie. That happened in, what was it, Captain America Civil War, which was, for all intents and purposes, an Avengers movie. They just called it a Captain America movie. This kind of felt like that. Like, I really wanted an adventure with a lot of Ant-Man, and he's in it throughout, but it's a 2-hour movie. I want to say it's an only 2 hours, which is unusual. I was actually surprised. This is like Bollywood movies. When a Bollywood movie's only 2.5 hours, you're like, they're making short subjects now. 2 hours, simply 2 hours for a Marvel movie is kind of unusual these days. But I keep saying again and again, and this is just for my taste, what I really want out of a Marvel movie or an Ant-Man movie, I want an hour and a half, and they have to stop a runaway train, or they have to foil a bank robbery, or just, it doesn't have to be the end of the universe every time, because the end of the universe, and I know it has to be, I guess, for Avengers movies to make them a grand enough scale to warrant having all the superheroes involved. But to me, over and over and over again, end of the universe, it gets a little tiring. You know they're going to save it, so it's just like there's no weight to the story. I'd rather just have a fun adventure where we see how somebody figures something out than, you know, the swirling universe sucking vortex again and again. So anyway, I've rambled long enough. You've probably already seen the film. If you did, let me know what you thought, because I've got friends. I have a couple friends I talked to about this, and I was like, yeah, I really didn't care for it. I thought it was kind of dull. And they were like, it was great. I was the best one of the group. So maybe it's just me. I don't know. Anyway, I look forward to more of these. I hope Paul Rudd does more Ant-Man movies. You always have to think about these things where these actors are not necessarily super young when they start these Marvel films, and they take a long time to make, and they don't come out at a great clip all the time, and they age out of the role. And it stinks, because you always wish it was like the old days where, you know, you get 5 or 6 movies or more out of a James Bond. Wish you could get that many movies out of some of these Marvel characters. I don't know. I hope we get more Ant-Man films. I hope they scale back the grandiosity of the next one, and it's just more Ant-Man, more Wasp, and more fun. So in theaters now from Marvel is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.